You're, of course, one of a handful of Republican members who crossed the aisle to sign a discharge petition that Democrats had put forward to extend Obamacare subsidies. How did we get here, Congressman? And what are you seeing that your party's leaders are not?
Well, look, we have two issues to deal with. One is the immediate expiration of these enhanced premium tax credits that were put in place by Democrats during COVID as a temporary measure to address healthcare affordability during a pandemic. Secondarily is the fact that under Obamacare, healthcare premiums have risen by 96%, while insurance company profits have grown by over 2,000% during the last 15 years. And so we need to tackle both of these issues concurrently. It's why I've been working in a bipartisan way since the shutdown ended to address the expiration of these subsidies and working with our leadership on putting forth a plan to address the larger issue of healthcare affordability in America. Obviously, I would like to see an ACA extension vote, and we worked tirelessly to try and negotiate an agreement with leadership to get a bill on the floor. Unfortunately, we couldn't find agreement, and so I had no alternative but to sign the discharge. I've signed 3 separate discharges, 2 bipartisan bills, and 1, the clean 3-year extension offered by Leader Jeffries, has already failed in the Senate. But the objective is to force a vote on the House floor, pass something, and let the Senate come back to us with a bipartisan agreement.
It's important to note, then, that you did sign off on 3 different versions. Did you sign this one, then, Congressman, holding your nose? I'm guessing you didn't want a 3-year extension to begin with.
Well, look, I don't have a problem with a 3-year extension at a hand. The issue is you need reform. You need reforms. And that's why we worked in a bipartisan way to come up with those compromises, including income limits. Somebody making $600,000 a year should not be subsidized by taxpayers for health insurance. We came up with insurance reforms to actually start holding the insurance companies accountable. We eliminate zero premium plans because everybody should have a little bit of skin in the game. So we've come up with a nominal $5 fee to really help root out fraud, which if you look at the CAO report, there is fraud in this system. And that's what we're trying to address, coupled with PBM reform and HSA expansion so that HSAs can be used to pay premiums and roll over from year to year, so people aren't, stuck in this use it or lose it game that often happens when you have an HSA.
Are these credit extensions the difference between another government shutdown or another CR come the end of January?
Well, ultimately, that's up to Democrats. Democrats said this was an existential crisis in the last shutdown. I had offered Leader Jeffries to sign on to a 1-year clean CR extension. He opposed that. We worked in a bipartisan way to come up with an agreement here. From my vantage point, shutting down the government is terrible policy. It hurts the American people. And no matter what policy disputes there are, you don't use government shutdown as a vehicle to extract.
I distinctly remember you visiting Leader Jeffries' office to make that point. So here we are. There have been 13 discharge petitions filed in 2025 to our count, which is pretty remarkable. You've already referred to 3 of them, others quite notable, including, of course, the Epstein files discharge petition. And I'll never forget our conversation about that, Congressman. That, of course, landed in a near unanimous vote. Does this new use of an old tool mean that leadership is no longer required? What does it say about the Speaker?
No, I don't think it says that. At the end of the day, we have a very tight majority. This is the smallest majority in the history of Congress. And so discharges are, frankly, more likely because it only takes a handful of Republicans to sign on if every single Democrat joins. So, this is why you're seeing it a little bit more. But the Speaker is doing a very good job in a very difficult situation. He's got to manage 219 personalities, including mine, in the majority. It's not an easy task. And the fact is he's done it very effectively. this was a situation where we couldn't reach an agreement. And there were a number of reasons why. But ultimately, I felt I had to represent my district and do what I thought was right, regardless of party, and advance the discharge to force a vote on the House floor.
Well, it's interesting because you had some pretty colorful language coming out of the meeting the other day with the speaker, in which it was clear that it would require a discharge petition, that he wasn't going to bring an extension to the floor. So whether it's your personality, as you just referred, Congressman, or Elise Stefanik, your colleague from New York, Marjorie Taylor Greene, any number of members seem to be upset with the speaker right now. It sounds like you're still in his corner. Does he need to worry about a motion to vacate?
Oh, listen, him and I have a very good relationship, and we've spoken repeatedly over the last 24 hours.
Okay.
I am more focused on finding a solution to the issues before us. I don't think he has anything to worry about with a motion to vacate, and nor should he. So
you don't think the speakership is at risk? I hear you there. What was his tone and tenor in talking with you over the past 24 hours? Because you know how the media is playing this is Mike Lawler broke from the speaker.
Well, listen, I obviously broke from leadership and did what I thought was right. A discharge petition is a tool of every member, not just the minority. And this is something that I felt very strongly about. But again, he and I have had very direct conversations. I have no animosity about it. It is just the reality of the situation. And it required action on my part if I wanted to advance this bill. And that was the position I took. And I own it.
I mentioned the Epstein discharge petition, Congressman. Should the American people prepare for a big document drop on Friday, or will the Department of Justice find a reason to not release them?
Look, the law was very clear. They should abide by it, and they should release all the documents.
So you expect that to actually happen?
I do.
You know, there was some concern about the Department of Justice, for instance, saying that there was an ongoing investigation into any number of Democrats that the president had flagged, including Bill Clinton. But of course, Susie Wiles suggested something different in her interview with Vanity Fair, which brings me lastly to the question that you may or may not want to answer. Kevin McCarthy was at the White House today. He was with President Trump on Marine One as the president departed for the dignified transfer today at Dover, which was a very solemn affair, but it raised a lot of eyebrows to see the former speaker at the White House. I asked Patrick McHenry about that today. Was he interviewing to be the next chief of staff? Do you think he'd be good in that job?
Oh, look, I have the utmost respect and affection for Kevin McCarthy. I wouldn't be in Congress without him. I think he'd be terrific in any number of roles in the administration. But I have great confidence in Susie Wiles. I know the president does. I think she's done a tremendous job as chief of staff, and I think she will continue in that capacity.